Hey guys, welcome back to Antel Economics. This is podcast 13, where we're going to be talking about whether world peace is achievable, hosted by myself and Ravi.
So before we get into that, obviously we have tweet of the week. So tweet of the week this week is Google's influence on the world is immense, although not a monopoly. Could increased government reliance become a problem in the future? Please comment down below what you think and make sure to give us a follow on Twitter at Antel Economics.
So yeah, world peace, Ravi. Obviously we're very far away from world peace. I don't think we've ever achieved it ever. Do you think that we can ever do it in the future?
I think world peace is something that will never be achieved.
Yeah.
My reason for this being is that there's such a vast amount of countries. Maybe there's 200 plus countries in the world. There's 7 billion people in the world. There's so many people and countries that there will never be complete cooperation. There will always be tension somewhere. There will always be conflicts because everyone has their self-interests at heart, which means
Yeah.
that people will never be able to actually get along because everyone is essentially trying to climb to the top of a massive ladder.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. In terms of like just the vast amount of people there's always going to be this kind of conflicts between interest, and it's going to be hard to satisfy everyone. In terms of like the looking at an economics point of view, obviously I'd have to back that point with the fact that there's limited resources in the world as well.
Oh
We
yeah.
don't have infinite resources, and so at at some point in the future there will be conflicts, and people will have to um, operate in their best interests rather than collective.
Yeah, I think as you touched upon, scarcity of resources is the forefront of the economic issues,
Yeah.
and we see that day in day out with the issues of oil. We see conflicts over oil all the time. We see corruption over oil. Resources which aren't readily available, but where they are available, it often causes conflict unless they're properly and adequately managed.
Mm.
What do you think the role is of larger countries? Do you think they are the reason why world peace is probably less achievable?
I think the fact that some countries are more successful than the other, it isn't a bad thing. I think that if we are to encourage this kind of free market, or kind of, if the goal is for economic growth as the end result and for prosperity, then if we start blaming these big countries who are doing that, you're kind of taking away from the whole point of this system, and you're kind of encouraging the system, but at the same time you're discouraging it, if you know what I mean. So I
Yeah.
think the big countries being big is no issue to them. They should continue doing what they are doing, but what we should be looking to do is helping to bring these countries that are struggling as well up along with us.
Yeah, I think one thing I particularly believe in is the exploitation of these lower countries, so obviously known as LIDCs, EDCs. I feel like they are heavily exploited by
Yeah.
countries which are higher up, like the UK, like the USA, which outsource a lot of their manufacturing and their servicing because they know that they can get away with poor work conditions and cheap labor because in their own country it's just not acceptable.
Do you
And so
think that's a bad thing though?
I do think it's a bad thing because these are basic human rights. They should be working in adequate conditions. They shouldn't be putting their health at risk to make a few garments for people in these richer countries.
Um, do see a point, and the I do agree with the kind of the what's it called, the human rights aspect of it. The conditions of work, etc., etc. But in terms of the pay, and loads of people have been complaining of the pay. Loads of notable economists, not David, Joseph Stiglitz for one, he's been seen to talk about the fact that these opportunities that are arising due to globalization, the exploitation, as people say, of these workers, it's actually providing them with a better life than they would have, because their other alternatives are agricultural jobs that are very low in pay, that are worse in pay actually than the factory workers, that are more intensive, and these factory workers, it's giving them an opportunity for a better life.
Yeah, I see your point there. Definitely, it's more than nothing. It's better than having nothing, I guess. But
Yeah.
I still think that from a from if we're trying to achieve world peace here, We should be trying to obviously level up everyone in these lower countries, and we shouldn't be trying to take them for cheap labor. Also, but I do see your point how they're definitely earning more money in this scenario rather than just say doing farming for themselves where they would not make as much profit.
Yeah,
So, so I think there's two sides to the coin here. So obviously, world peace can be achievable, but I still feel like it's definitely I don't think it's achievable, you see, because there's just a problem with the vast amount of people in the world.
yeah. No, I see what you mean. Do you think that world peace, in order for world peace to be achieved, do you think that it's necessary for everyone to be economically equal as well as social?
I don't think they have to be economically and socially equal. I don't think that will ever arise. I think that's pretty much impossible unless you want to have a communist regime
Yeah,
across the world, which is not really beneficial because then even so there'll still be one person at the top who leads it all. So
yeah,
it will never really work in that sort of sense. I think the only way to essentially have that sort of equality socially and financially and all of that is by having by not having the risk of conflict and things, like not having that
mm,
doubt and possibility that the world may come to a war in 10
yeah,
15 years time, just having that sort of peace of mind that
yeah,
everything is stable. I think that is enough to be socially equal.
yeah. No, I see what you mean. So, would you say that it's a good idea to have a kind of a governing body of the world, kind of like the European Union, but extended to all countries. And this kind of way of governance would ensure that everyone is represented in that body. And at the same time, there is one central power in the world which can hopefully stimulate peace.
Well, you do have the EU. I think they do a fairly good job. They take a lot of countries within Europe, and they help sort of provide opportunities not just for people in those countries, but for people also outside. They open corridors, like they allow immigration to an extent. They allow, but obviously, if we had a massive body like that across the world, there's a problem with managing it. There are, we're talking about 10 times the amount of countries than there are in Europe.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think that's a very difficult thing to control. You
yeah,
have bodies like the IMF, so the
yeah,
International Monetary Fund, and they do provide a lot of help. You have WHO,
yeah.
uh,
The World
WTO,
Bank.
yeah, World Bank. So there are a lot of international organizations,
Yeah.
but I think it's very hard to have one which will control sort of all of them under one belt.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get what you mean. It kind of links back to this idea of, oh, actually, this is an interesting question. Do you think that a kind of a dictatorship is a viable way of leadership if the dictator is someone that the population really enjoys and likes and is doing what's best for the country?
Well, I think that comes down to personal preference. That if you wouldn't mind being under dictatorship, like you're okay to have limited opportunities, limited chances, limited earning power, things like that, then fine. If you're all about happiness and welfare, then I think that is one of the probably the best routes to go down. I
Mm,
think if you're looking at that from a non-selfish point of view, it would be the best thing for the world.
yeah.
But the problem is that everyone has their own self-interest at heart, and so no one really, if they know that they can do better than what they're being offered, then obviously they will strive for more.
Yeah, I
And
see. Yeah, yeah, agree,
so
agree.
that's a problem.
So what you're arguing is if you really want to kind of increase the dynamic nature of the economy and promote growth, you'd have to do that in a democracy, not an author. I think it's the authority. I don't in a dictatorship kind of way. That's
Yeah,
basically what you're saying, isn't it?
yeah. I've got a question. So, what do you think about? So, if we were say trying to find world peace, what would your thoughts be on say countries merging? So, for example, I don't know, say you merge two poor countries together, you change the name of those two countries, they become a whole new entity, but
Yeah.
it's a way of them going forward to be a larger mass and have a larger control.
Um, I can see how, in principle, that would be a good idea, and I think if executed properly, that would really help to balance the kind of global inequalities around the world.
Mm.
Like if the poorer countries group together and manages to pool their resources, they can be on par with some of the developing countries, and so their economies and as a result the living standards of their people will increase. But I think logistically and in practice that's going to be very hard to do because first of all you're going to have to merge countries that are geographically close to each other, because if you
Yeah.
don't do that, then it's very very hard to take the most out of that. um, and when you're looking at these kind of poorer countries, most often than not, these neighboring countries are often in conflict. They're often in, bad relationships with each other, or just they don't have the infrastructure to facilitate that kind of mashup between countries. So it is going to be very hard, and I don't think it's a feasible way forward.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think in principle it looks like a very nice idea. You get to bring people together, bring countries together, a bit more
Yeah,
of that temporal cooperation. But
yeah,
then overall, when you look at it logistically, it's going to be so difficult because you're going to have to merge governments together, get infrastructure. You've got things like currencies. It's a
yeah,
lot of
exactly. Yeah.
effort, and a lot more work than what meets the eye. So I think that's
Yeah. I think instead of merging the countries, I think once again things like the European Union, if Africa had a kind of African Union, Asia had one as well, it would help unite the countries and promote growth within that continent, and that could help elevate those continents to the same level as some of the more developed ones such as Europe and America.
Yeah, I
North
think
America.
that's a fairly good idea. You could help reduce those internal conflicts. There's quite a lot in Africa where you have, and particularly in Asia as well. You're having China versus India right now. We've had India versus Pakistan for a long time.
Yeah.
So reducing these internal conflicts within these continents would, I think, definitely benefit long-term growth and help long-term cooperation between all the continents.
Yeah, 100% agree. This is more of a kind of a philosophical question rather than economic. But do you think there can be peace without suffering first, or instead of suffering, let's say conflict?
I think that's a very difficult question to answer. I think conflict is. I know some people say conflict is a good thing because they feel like rejuvenates people. It gives people opportunities. It helps provide economic growth in the long term
Yeah.
because of all the financial implications. But would it actually help world peace achieve? Well, I think it's going right against the whole point of world peace. So I know how you say things get worse before they get better, but I can't see how having mass conflict would benefit the world.
Don't you think that if there are maybe like a couple countries that stand in the way of achieving world peace, let's say if like, a vast majority of the countries are looking forward to cooperating as one under the same governing body, and there is maybe one or two countries that are standing against that, do you think that it's fair for the countries that are for world peace to kind of engage in conflict against the countries that aren't in order to achieve the complete world peace?
No, I don't think that's a sensible idea. If your whole point is to achieve world peace, why would you go after attacking another country just because they don't want it? But obviously they would. I don't see why a country would not want world peace if every other country is for it. So
In the front yard.
in that of mind, you have to look at trying to promote to them why world peace is a better alternative. So you have to sort of push them in a non-violent and non-conflicting way towards the idea of world peace.
Using that ideology, couldn't you therefore argue that making investments is a stupid idea, because if you want to make money, spending money just seems counter logical. So in the same way, couldn't you say to prevent conflict, if you engage in a bit of conflict now, the end result is a much greater return?
Well, you could say that, but it would. I still think it's against your whole ideology. Like your whole point is to promote world peace, but you're going to go and create conflict with another country. I see. I see. I understand why you do it, because then in the long term it would obviously solve all the issues, because you could then take control of those countries and ensure and enforce world peace. But I feel like it's not a natural way of doing it. I feel like you're forcing it, and I don't think it's. What if the people in those countries are really against world peace? You may have, say, you have China and India. That's 2 billion people that against you. And I think that's where you then risk, if they don't want what you're offering,
Yeah.
not just a civil war, but an outbreak from just wars
Yeah.
internally
large
to
scale.
internationally. Yeah.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, and like thinking about it, countries like China are going to be very reluctant to engage in something like this,
Yeah.
where they are doing so well in the kind of competitive market.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you have to take in perspective. If it was, say, two really, really small countries with a population of 300 people, I think then it's a lot more feasible and achievable. But in
Yeah.
this sense, if you were to look at it from a large perspective, I
Mm.
think it could pose massive challenges, and it could, in fact, worsen the current conflict situation if
Yeah,
there was one. So
yeah. I see what you mean. I think
well,
that's a nice note to end on.
yeah, thank you guys very much for listening. Make sure you follow us at Antel Economics on Twitter, and make sure to subscribe, like, and comment down below for what you want to see in the future.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you guys.
See ya.